James drove his modest SUV into the parking lot of Elite Motors, the luxury car dealership he recently acquired in bustling New York City. The summer heat radiates from the luxury cars parked outside, their glossy paintwork seemingly shining in the afternoon sunlight. He parked in an unmarked spot in the back and got out, taking a moment to survey the front of the dealership. James didn't dress to attract attention. Quite the opposite. He wore a simple gray hoodie, slightly old jeans and sneakers. His decision to dress modestly was deliberate. He wanted to see the true nature of the dealership, experience how it operates when no one knows the new boss is watching. As he walked towards the door, he noticed a small group of employees inside, chatting near the reception desk. Giggles and intimate conversations echoed through the glass door. James opened the door and walked in. The air-conditioned showroom was a stark contrast to the heat outside, filled with the smell of leather and new wax. Rows of neat cars shine under the bright lights on the ceiling. The chatter subsided as he entered. James caught fleeting glances exchanged between the staff, their eyes gliding over his hoodie and sneakers. He felt the subtle change in the atmosphere, the kind that spoke more than words. But he didn't come here to make assumptions. He came to observe. Then from the other side of the gallery, she appeared, Emma. Emma is a middle-aged woman with sharp features and even sharper eyes. Her tailored suit and shiny high heels exuded power, and the file, clipped under her arm, added to her efficiency. She approached with clear purpose, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Her expression was polite at first glance, but there was a tension in her smile that James couldn't ignore. "Excuse me," Emma began, her voice cold and curt. "How can I help you?" James smiled, his demeanor calm. "I just came to look around," he said casually, pointing towards the cars. Emma's eyes narrowed, surveying him from head to toe, her mask of politeness slipping a little, replaced by something less friendly. "Are you buying a car?" she asked, her voice carrying a bit of doubt. James nodded, still smiling. "Something like that." Emma's lips tightened. "We serve a very specific clientele here. Most of our inventory requires prior verification. Perhaps I can introduce?" Before she could finish, another employee called out, "Hey, Emma, the delivery guy's here." Her attention wandered for a moment, but her eyes returned to James, as if making sure he wouldn't wander too far. James raised his eyebrows but kept his voice light. "Are you saying I'm not qualified?" The question seemed to surprise her, but only for a moment. She quickly regained her composure, her posture stiff. "I'm just trying to save you time," she replied with a forced smile. "These cars start at 6 figures. With maybe, I can guide you to—" James's expression remained unchanged, but inwardly, he took note of her choice of words. His calm demeanor remained unwavering, but the subtle sense of hurt from her assumptions was undeniable. The moment dragged on, tension hanging in the air as Emma stared at him with anticipation. James looked around the showroom, pretending to admire one of the nearby cars. It is a silver coupe with a strong design. His fingers slid over the door handle, and he glanced at Emma. "Nice car," he said simply. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, but she still tried to smile. "Yes, perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can arrange a date. Now I must ask you, do not touch the vehicles." James stood there for a moment, considering her words before stepping back from the car. He nodded once, his hands still in his pockets, and motioned for her to continue. "Okay, let me listen. What advice would you give to someone like me?" Emma blinked, surprised by the directness of his question, but before she could answer, James added, "If you think you know what I need, I'd love to hear it." Her curtain of politeness crumbled just enough to reveal the impatience underneath. Maybe there's something a little more budget-friendly, she said. I can direct you to the dealership that specializes in used car sales. James smiled slightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've seen enough. That's a pretty big assumption, he said softly. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Emma was confused. Then regaining her composure, she straightened her shoulders. I'll be back with a list of options, she said, then walked away quickly. James looked after her, his expression unpredictable. He turned back to the silver coupe, his reflection staring back at him on the polished surface. Today will be an interesting day. James stood in the center of the showroom, hands in pockets, eyes scanning the row of cars. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but Emma's disdain was hard to ignore. Around him, the staff resumed their conversations, although still glancing in his direction from time to time. It was the kind of scrutiny he had grown accustomed to over the years, the silent judgment, the hidden glances. Emma returned a moment later, clutching the file as if it were a shield. Her brisk walk and forced smile betrayed her irritation. Okay, she said, stopping a few steps away from him. I've put together a few options that might be more suitable for your situation. James tilted his head a bit. My situation? Yes, Emma replied, her voice curt. She handed him a printed sheet of used car models, each with a detailed description and a price much lower than the dealership's standard rate. These are more popular models, reliable, economical, and practical. James took the list without saying a word, his eyes scanning the page. An older sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid. His lips twitched with amusement, but he quickly hid it, folded the paper, and stuffed it in his pocket. Thanks for your effort, he said, his tone calm. Emma seemed confused by his reaction, but she quickly regained her composure, placing her hands on her hips. Look, she said, her voice lowering as if she were about to share a secret. I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Elite Motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste my time. Where's yours? James met her eyes, his expression calm but determined. And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer? Emma hesitated, but only for a split second. I've been doing this for a long time, she said. I can tell when someone is out of my league. Beyond capacity, James repeated, his voice neutral, almost pensive. Interesting. There was a flicker of insecurity in Emma's eyes, but she continued, I'm just being honest. It's better to be frank from the start than to let someone go home disappointed. James chuckled, shaking his head. Honestly, I like honesty. So how about this? Can I talk to the store owner? Do you think we can do it? Emma's eyebrows raised. For the first time, she was truly surprised. The store owner? Yes, James said, his voice gentle, almost intimate. I'd like to exchange a few words with them. The corner of Emma's mouth twitched in a poor attempt to smile. Well, that's impossible. The shop owners don't come here for casual visits. They're busy people. I'm sure so, James nodded. But maybe you could call them. Let them know I'm here. I think they'll want to see me. Emma's smile was tense. She was starting to lose patience, and it was obvious. Look, sir, she said, trying to be as polite as possible. But this is getting ridiculous. I have other customers to serve. If you're serious about buying a car, we can maybe arrange a meeting with one of our sales consultants. If not, what if not? James asked, his voice still calm, though with an unmistakable edge to it. Emma narrowed her eyes, frustration flowing. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. James stood still, his eyes locked on her for a moment. The whole gallery seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, James took the phone out of his pocket and dialed the contacts. Okay, he said, scrolling through the list of phone numbers. I'll call myself. Emma blinked, her eyebrows furrowed. "What are you doing?" "Just calling the owner," James replied, bringing the phone to his ear. "It won't be long." Emma's confidence wavered, discomfort giving way to confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Around them, a few employees had stopped their work, their attention drawn by the scene unfolding. James held up a finger as if to say, "Wait a minute," then turned around and said into the phone, "Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine, just a little misunderstanding. Can you let them know I'm here?" He ended the call and stuffed his phone in his pocket, turning back to Emma. "They'll be here soon," he said simply. Emma stared at him, mouth slightly open. "Who? Who did you call?" James didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the showroom, his eyes landing on the staff, who were watching intently. "Guess what?" he said, his voice almost cheerful. The tension in the room was almost palpable, its weight weighing on everyone. Emma fidgeted with the folder in her hand, although her movements were stiff and deliberate, reflecting her nervousness. Minutes passed, but the room seemed frozen in time. Emma busied herself with a file, although her movements were stiff and deliberate, reflecting her insecurity. James, on the other hand, stood leisurely next to a luxury SUV, his calm demeanor only adding to the tension. The sound of the main door opening broke the silence. A man wearing a navy blue suit walked in, his shiny shoes clicking gently on the tile floor. His expression was serious but warm, and his eyes immediately found James. "Mr. Carter," the man said with a bright smile, holding out his hand as he approached. "Nice to meet you." James returned the handshake with a firm grip, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you for coming, Alex. I appreciate it." The whole room stiffened. The folder almost slipped out of Emma's hand as her eyes flicked back and forth between James and Alex, the dealership's regional manager. Her confusion quickly turned into obvious concern. "Wait, Mr. Carter," she repeated, her voice uncertain. Alex turned to her, his friendly demeanor changing to something more professional, almost brusque. "Emma, I see you've met Mr. Carter." Emma blinked, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. I didn't realize." "You don't realize that he's the new owner of this dealership." Alex finished his sentence, his voice sharp. He glanced at James, a guilty look on his face. "I hope this isn't the greeting you were expecting." James raised his hand, stopping him. "It's okay, Alex. I think Emma and I just misunderstood each other." His voice was calm, but there was weight in each word, making the whole room listen. Emma's face turned white, and she took a step back, the documents clutched to her chest like a lifeline. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." "You don't know that I could be the owner of a place like this, that someone like me could actually belong here." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed completely lost. "I didn't mean—" James raised his hand, interrupting her. "It's okay, Emma, really." He took a step closer, his voice lowering just enough to make everyone lean forward. "But let me ask you something. Hey, if I wasn't the boss, would you treat me differently? Would you give me the respect you give someone who walks in here in a suit and tie?" Emma opened her mouth but was speechless. The silence was deafening. James nodded as if her silence was answer enough. He turned to Alex, his voice carrying a new authority. "Let's gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we have a little chat about how things work here."